So welcome everybody to Textile Medley. My name is Danlia Schoenfuss, and I am a white woman with short brown hair, blue glasses, and these purple woven earrings with long orange fringe. I am also the program manager for Intertwine Arts, the organization that is hosting this talk today, which is a nonprofit whose mission is to inspire creativity, joy, and self-confidence through freeform weaving for people of all ages with disabilities or chronic illness. But today we are here for Textile Medley, an artist talk series where Intertwine Arts highlights amazing artists with textile practices and influences alongside the amazing textile artists that we Intertwine Arts already have on staff. While Intertwine mainly focuses on weaving, we love to encourage and dip our toes into a range of fiber mediums, techniques, and tools that allows everyone to express their tactile creativity in ways that are accessible for disabled and chronically ill artists. And so today we are interweaving the arts practices of Anna-Maie and Bryana Bibbs. How this is going to go is we are going to start off with Anna-Maie sharing her work for roughly 15 to 20 minutes. After that, Bryana will share her work for 15 to 20 minutes. And then after that, Bryana, Anna-Maie, and myself will discuss some of the commonalities and divergences in their work and experiences. So with that, I am going to ask Anna-Maie to take it away.
I'm going to share my screen. Great. Hi, everyone. I'm Anna-Maie. I am the creative director of Intertwine Arts. I go by she, her. I'm a white woman with reddish, brownish hair, lots of freckles, orange glasses, and I'm wearing pink lipstick right now, which I like to do. Yeah, like I said, I'm the creative director of Intertwine Arts. I'm based here in Manhattan, but I'm originally from the UK. And I've been a teaching artist for the last five years. And my bachelor's degree was in textile design, so that's a bit of my background. So I'm going to go back in time to 2017, and this was my graduate collection. It was called The Mind's Eye, and I just think it's really in theme with what we're talking about today, about mental health and journaling through art. So this collection was inspired by an exhibition that I saw at the Welcome Centre in London. And it was an exhibition of outsider artwork from people who are from, it was a mental health hospital in London. I think it was called Bethlehem, but it was a while ago. But yeah, so it was artwork from people at that hospital. So people with schizophrenia or bipolar disorder and like all different kinds of mental health disorders. And I really loved the exhibition, and I thought it was so kind of like surreal and really fascinating to visually look into someone's mind. I just thought that it was a great exhibition, so I kind of was inspired by that for this project. So I started by doing my own research. I actually collected a bunch of surveys of anonymous surveys across the internet, and asked people about their mental health, and especially the imagery around their mental health. So I was really interested in, like, when you're in that moment where you're having like a panic attack or something's happening, and like what is going through your mind at that point? Like, what do you see in your mind's eye? And I really wanted to like take that and then translate it into art and into imagery. And the collection was a menswear collection, so the fabrics were for men to wear. And I thought that that was kind of nice to challenge men to like talk about their mental health more and be more vulnerable about that. So that was the whole concept behind the collection. And this is just some of the initial research for that. And then this was the final collection, which I actually specialized in jacquard weaving at university. So I was on a TC2 jacquard loom. So from left to right, the image on the left is just a printed fabric of lots of images of eyes. And then there's jacquard woven mohair flame fabric that I visualized into pants. And then there's a blue jacquard fabric with lots of illustrations of eyes. And there's an image that's the back side of the fabric. And then on the front side of the fabric, I embroidered beads that look like eyelashes onto the eyes. Yeah, and then this is just some more fabric from that collection. So again, some more jacquard fabric. So the first image is a black and gray fabric that has an image of Jesus on it. And then above Jesus is Jesus kind of like distorted, because in the research that I did, a lot of religious iconology was coming up. Yeah. Oh, I'm like talking very fast. Gonna take a breath. So yeah, and then the second piece of fabric is the same colorway, like gray and white, and has scribbled handwriting and notes. And then the last fabric is like blue cloud pattern with these like crazy metallic tassels that you can't really see in the picture, but it was like kind of nice. Yeah, so this was for my textile design course. So the brief was very much that the fabric should be a viable like commercial project at the end. So I ended up not really going into textile design because I didn't like that aspect of, I didn't really want to like be a commercial designer. I wanted to do more fiber art. So that's what happened. But I still really like this collection and enjoyed it a lot. Yeah. So after I graduated, I actually came to New York for an internship at Loop of the Loom, which is a weaving studio here in New York. And that's when I discovered the Sayori loom, which is a really lovely loom. It's very simplified down, like it's kind of like the very basic form of a loom, and it's designed that way to be super accessible for people. So I loved that loom, and after doing all the really complicated fussy jacquard computer stuff, like I was just really enjoying the simplicity of the loom, and my work at that time like is just really basic and simple, which I think is fine. And and I also, it was a very transitional period for me because I was, living at home with my parents and working a bunch of jobs to raise money to move to America. So I was kind of stressed, and I think that this fabric is like kind of represents that. Like it's not very experimental or like pushy. It's more just like me just not really having the bandwidth to do very much at all. And the middle piece is like just a really close up of a piece of fabric that I made while I was interning at Loop with the Loom, which was a great experience. And I was having a really bad day, and I just needed to do something. So I decided to just get some black yarn and just weave black. And I started weaving black and black and black, and I just kept going with the black. And as I kept going, I started to feel much better. And then I was looking at my fabric, and I was like, I don't think this is really reflective of like my mood anymore. Like I feel like I kind of like got myself out of the funk that I was in. So I just wove like a little tiny smiley face into the black fabric, and I don't know, I just keep hold of that piece. Like even now I have it like right here on my desk because I just liked the I kind of managed to turn myself around and make something like cute and fun out of a bad day that I was having. So 2020, I'm moved to New York now full time. I got married, and the pandemic hit. So that was a pretty like busy time for me, and also very stressful. And I think my work kind of reflects that because it's still very simple and zen. And I think I was just really trying to find some zen in my life, like when everything else was going crazy outside of my life. Yeah. And I always to this day am annoyed with myself because I wish I had 3 months to do nothing like I did back then, but I was just so stressed that I didn't do very much artwork. And now I'm like, that was such a good opportunity to make so much work. And I didn't take it. So, I mean, obviously at the time it was very stressful. Like, you know, I don't blame myself for not being able to get out of bed a lot of days, but yeah, so that's that's this time. And the last image is an image of like a close-up detail of the first dress that I made, the first like piece of garment that I made from my own hand-woven fabric. And I didn't have a sewing machine, and I stitched the whole thing by hand during the pandemic. And then later, after the pandemic, I bought a sewing machine and restitched it again. But yeah, I was pretty like proud to do that. Yeah, so then after that, yeah, I've been teaching artists here in New York and making more pieces and starting to get a bit more experimental and playful with my work and making more garments, which I really enjoy doing, and using different materials. And I've been meeting great people along the way. So the jacket in the middle is like a multicolored kimono style jacket, and it's made of hand spun yarn that my friend Fawn made. So yeah, this kind of just reflects, you know, getting out of that COVID funk and into some more nice pieces that I enjoyed to make. And the piece on the left side is like super tassely fun piece that I ended up cutting up and making into a dress because why not? And the piece on the right is a piece that I made while working at Loop of the Loom, and it's on display at Loop of the Loom, and I don't know, people always like really like it. So yeah, I guess that's my most popular piece of artwork that I ever made because it's the most visual. Yeah, so this is an example of some kind of work that I made like journaling with weaving. So I went through a phase where I experimented with similar to my graduate collection project, like thinking of feelings and like how I can translate that into fabric. So what colors come to mind, what textures come to mind. And this piece is from a random day that I spent in New York, and it was kind of stressful experience. Nothing went wrong. I just like was feeling stressed the whole day, and I came home and I was really annoyed with myself that what should have been a good day, like I ruined it by being so anxious. Not I didn't ruin it, but it was ruined by me being so anxious, and it kind of like stuck with me for days afterwards, and I decided to just like try to weave it out. So it's a long thin strip, and it's kind of like a timeline of how the day went, according to like how me and like the colors that I think represent what happened during the day. And I really enjoyed making it, and I enjoyed that afterwards I had something that I like, even though it's just a small little strip of weaving, and it was like a positive outcome for a day that was bad. So yeah, that's kind of like something that I really like is art and weaving and making things is a good way to, you know, take something bad and just like still have something beautiful from it afterwards. On that thought, this is another piece of mine that is it's like special to me because of why I made it and when I made it. Yeah, so it was another like bad experience, and yeah, without going into it too much, but I got some feedback around the same time that my artwork was too rigid and too like not free enough and not experimental enough, which I agree is right. But I really just didn't like take that very well at the time. And this was kind of like, this piece was like just an angry piece that I made where I was like, I'm just gonna do whatever I feel like doing, I'm just gonna do the opposite. So whatever color I think goes with that color, I'm going to do the opposite. Whatever texture I think is appropriate for this pattern or whatever, I'm going to do the opposite. And so it's kind of like like exercising some stuff that I needed to exercise. And I think it's like totally ugly, but I think it's really nice to me and special to me. And I think I just needed to do it. And I still think my work is too rigid and I'm not brave enough to like be experimental and make mistakes and fail. But I think that, you know, I'll work on it. But this was fun. So yeah, so that those are two examples of some work that, you know, is like in the vein of mental health and journaling. And I have more pieces like that, but you know, 15 minutes. So this is just some more recent work. And as you can see, like from the beginning, I'm more having fun with color and pattern and experimenting. And I really love to make garments now. That's like my thing. Yeah, so this is kind of where it's going. I think that's it. Yeah, I'm gonna stop sharing my screen. Is that okay, Dana?
Yeah, that was amazing. Thank you for sharing. I mean, some personal stuff and sort of working through it through weaving is always an amazing thing to see and talk about. And I've learned more about you through it.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me to do this. I always think that I'm like a bad artist, that I don't make enough art and I don't do exhibitions and stuff. So I really appreciated being asked.
Of course, and everybody, you know, our philosophy is also everybody's an artist. There's no such thing as a bad artist, and but at the same time, all artists have that imposter syndrome sometimes, I think. So thank you for sharing. We're going to now jump to Bryana sharing her work for, again, 15 to 20 minutes, and then we'll do the Q&A at the end.
All right, hello everyone. Thank you so much to Intertwine Arts for inviting me to be a part of this conversation. My name is Bryana Bibbs. I'm a Black woman currently wearing a blue and white button up. I also have my headphones in and I have dark brown hair. I'm a Chicago-based textile artist and educator. I'm primarily focused on hand weaving and spinning and using found objects in my work as well. But conceptually, my work has a lot to do with mental health and trauma and grief and loss, and how I am kind of taking the time to process all of those things. And so the first work that I want to talk about today is a piece called Actor that I had done in 2022. This piece is actually done for a residency here in Chicago called Chicago Artists Coalition. And the piece is 65 inches long and 36 feet going across the wall here. And it's made up of hand-woven writings in cotton. The writings in this piece come from a traumatic relationship that I was in for about 10 years. And so journaling has always been a really significant part of my life. Like I used to journal a lot when I was a kid. I used to journal a lot throughout my teens and up into young adult. But this was a period of time that I did not have a journal nearby. And so instead I remember I had this stack of just blank computer paper, and I needed to kind of purge everything that I was feeling at this time. And so I had a Sharpie and I just went to writing just everything that I was feeling about what I had gone through in that relationship. And so once the purging was just kind of over, I looked at the stack and I was like, well, what am I going to do with this? Like, it's not in the book. It's not, anything that could just kind of be tucked away. And so my idea was to just shred all of the writings and weave each shred in bit by bit. And so the piece was actually acquired in 2022 by Delta Airlines. So if anybody is in Chicago and flies into O'Hare, you can take a look at the piece there. But I do want to take a brief moment to just kind of show what it was like when it was installed at Chicago Artists Coalition. So we had so much closer together. The strips they're woven into is about 5 inches wide. And again, 65 inches long. And I had had them closer together because it was a two-person exhibition. And then when we decided to, when Delta decided to acquire it, we made the decision to have a little bit more breathing room in between. And so one of the things I really enjoy about this piece is that I know what the writings say, but the viewer doesn't. And so I like that folks are able to kind of make their own connections and have their own experience with the work. And these are both detailed shots. And so while I was making after, I had also done a lot of hand spinning and hand carded materials as well. See my journal series later on in my presentation, but this was the first time that I had made a really large scale work. And so I had made this piece called Alone Against It All, the 2022. I had made this piece during a fellowship at the Lunder Institute for American Art, which is in Waterville, Maine. And this piece is 5.5 feet by 5.5 feet by 5 inches. And this piece is made up of all different kinds of materials. So there's wool, there's alpaca fleece, there's Angelina fiber, and recycled sari silk. There's also a few moments, which you can't really tell in this photo, but there are a few moments of me just kind of needle felting, just to add some more texture within the piece. But for me, this piece is more or less about mental health and just kind of what it's like to go through various traumas and feeling like it's just, it can be quite overwhelming. And so that's what this piece represents for me. And here is a detailed shot of the piece as well. So in 2023, I had created a piece called Numb. That was for an exhibition here in Chicago, and this piece is 6 feet by 6 feet by 5 inches. And it's hand woven cotton, and again, the hand spun wool that I use. And so in this piece, again, I'm thinking about traumas and mental health and just ways that I can translate that story through the use of color. I'm really inspired by not using text and using abstraction to just kind of tell my own story, but again, have the viewer have their own relationship to the work as well. And here is a detailed shot of it. And I'm sure a lot of folks can probably relate to people asking you, how long does a work take to be made and completed? And so back in 2022, a friend of mine who's also a curator for the piece after, I'd asked to take a photo of me making that piece, and we documented that process as much as we could. And so I kind of kept on to that. And so these are two Polaroids. One on the left is June 17th of 2022, when I built the frame loom for Alone Against It All. And then I had finished the weaving on July 25th of 2022. So I worked really hard on that piece while I was at Lunder. Lunder was only a 6-week fellowship. And so I made sure I documented that process as much as I could, from the time that I entered the studio to the time I left the studio, and how much material I was hand spinning every night into the morning. And then, as you can see, up until I finished the piece on the right. So in 2020, in July 2020, I had just come off of 2 series that I felt like I really enjoyed because it was a daily practice for me. In 2019, I left my job to be a full-time artist again after not working for like 5 years. And so when I jumped into weaving again and making these smaller scale works with the quarantine series and the natural series, I really enjoyed kind of every day or creating as much as I could. And so I came up with the journal series, which is something I had started in July of 2020, and it's been ongoing. So I've been doing them ever since. And for me, this series makes a lot of sense because, again, journaling has been so significant in my life. And for me to be able to create these visual works where I'm still able to tell where I've been, how I feel, what materials were interesting to me, that's really exciting. So this piece is from July 26th of 2020, 17 inches by 11.5 inches. And it has silk cocoons, recycled sari silk, hand-spun flax, recycled hand-spun flax, recycled sari silk, and wool. And you can see the detail image on the right. And then this is another piece that I had done from the journal series on October 10th of 2020 and October 12th. And this piece is 14 inches by 10.5. And I started experimenting with different things during this time too, like dried paint, as you can see here, and some of the detail on the right. And so because I went to Lunder in 2022, the journal series shifted quite significantly because now I was kind of responding to the environment that I was in. So I found myself using materials from the outdoors or using materials from certain events that I maybe to and incorporating like name tags or receipts and things like that. This instance, the image on the left, again, is from the journal series. It's July 17th of 2022, 50 by 18 inches. And this was made at McGrath Pond in Maine. And I have such fond memories of being with the other fellows and sitting amongst these large trees, and everybody was swimming in the pond. And I was like being a weirdo, like picking up all these pine needles nearby and weaving with those, which was really fun. And then the image on the right is from July 9th of last year to July 10th. It's 12 inches by 14 inches. And something else that I do too within the journal series is because people know how weird I am and I'm just willing to kind of weave with anything, people often give me things to incorporate into my journal series pieces. So somebody had given me all of this like fungus and bark and things like that. And so I decided to incorporate that into the weaving. And then also in July of last year, I started playing around with clay. So it's really kind of become experimental for me during this time. And with the clay, I was trying to kind of replicate some of the textures that you see with the hand spun material. So the one on the left is July 25th of 2023, 15.5 inches by 10. And then the one on the right, the day after, 13 inches by 15 inches. And it's got everything in here. It's got clay pieces. It's got a weaving demo from the class that I had taught time, recycled mulberry silk wools, and Bardell wool. And so then unexpectedly, my grandfather passed away on December 18th of last year. And so the journal series has really now kind of been this life and has truly documented my life in every which way. And so my grandfather, who I call my Papa George, was a very, very big tennis fan. He loved playing tennis. He tried teaching me tennis. I was terrible at it. But we have all of these tennis balls at the house. And so a week after he passed, I journaled. I didn't really have a lot of my hand spun material because my mother and I were taking care of him at that time before he passed. So I just used what little I had left. But this was made December 25th of last year. And it's 13 inches by 14 inches. And again, I had kind of taken apart all these tennis balls and taken apart the container And then something else that's really important to me too is just kind of saying where the work was created. So as you can see, it says created at Mount Pop George's house in Chicago. And the detail image is on the right. And then once I ran out of that hand spun material that I'd had, I went downstairs into the laundry room and I had seen that my Papa George's blanket was on one of the shelves. And my mom was like, oh, I'm going to throw it out, even though she just washed it, and said, no, I'm going to use it. And so I took the entire hospital blanket apart and started using that as my warp and my weft, while again incorporating these materials that have been around in this house forever. So these are some playing cards. As you can see on the right detail image, if you look at the red king of diamonds in the second row, you can see there's like some stains happening. I actually found a photo of myself. I think I'm like 10 or 12 playing with these same cards. So they've been around for a really long time. And it's really important for me to just kind of keep that memory and not clean anything up, to just show that these were used. This one is 11.5 inches by 14.5. And then 2 weeks ago, my Mima actually passed away from Alzheimer's. She had it for about close to a decade, maybe a little bit longer. And so when her mind, I think when she knows that her mind was starting to decline and she was with Alzheimer's, I think she realized she was unable to care for the live plants that were in her home. And so she bought all of these artificial plants and flowers, as you can see. And so the day after she passed, this is August 20th, 2024 from the journal series, I used my grandfather's athletic tee and some of the pajama pants that he was gifted, and then incorporated some of my moss flowers into the work as well. And then just briefly, I want to touch on how all this kind of relates to my educator practice. I love teaching never woven before weaving. I think it's really exciting and I enjoy seeing what people do. The image on the left is just kind of various weavings that were done when I taught with Crafting the Future in Tennessee last year. And we were with, or I was with the chaperones and some of the students for about a week in Tennessee. So we got to learn various things. And things that I really encouraged them to do was to see what objects they could find nearby. And so the image on the right is a close-up of one of the weavings. And I think what's really great about it is I kind of still remember the story that the student told me, because I remember me and the TA were like, where did you get these random black screws from? And so she said she had just like found them near one of the cabins. And so I like that I still remember that story, and am able to share that with the piece. And then these are 2 more weavings as well. That time in Tennessee, the weaving on the left, that is an orange peel. And the students had eaten an orange during lunch. And I remember they asked me, they said, can I weave the orange in there? I was like, yeah, do whatever you want. And that's what they came up with. It's really great. And then the one on the right has some pipe cleaners incorporated in it, as well as some rocks. Yeah. That's it.
All right, thank you so much for sharing all of that, Bryana. It's I really love that you're just so direct about some very vulnerable parts of your life and how experimental you are with what you do. There are some very lovely comments in the chat too for you, of people appreciating what you do. So thank you. So with that, I am now also going to spotlight Anna-Maie as we move into our discussion portion. So as we hop into that, there was a quick question in the chat for you, Bryana, about do you use frame looms? Do you make your looms? What do you generally use to construct your weavings?
Yeah, so for the for like Alone Against It All and Numb, those were just built out of sixes with just nails at the bottom. But then for the journal series, I use the Shaft Lily Loom. It's just like I think it's like 10 by 15 inches, and it's just got like pegs at the top and the bottom. So those are the two that I use.
Awesome, thank you. So do you guys have anything you want to share first? I can jump in with some questions I have ready, but sometimes some thoughts come up when we see each other's work.
Yeah, I would love to say that I really love your work, Bryana, and I just really appreciate how vulnerable you are in your artwork. Like that's something that I really struggle with, and I think it's such a huge part of being an artist and why I always say I'm not an artist, I'm not an artist, I'm just a teacher. But I
No,
think
you
it's really
definitely
great. And I also really
Thank
love
you.
that seeing your students' work and how much your own style is like reflected in your students' work. Like I just think that's really cool. And like you can see that you've handed over your like skill and like your love of your practice like onto them, which I think that's really nice.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I really enjoyed your journaling work as well when you were talking about like the colors and the textures. And then also, I think as weavers, we always have those moments of frustration and we always have feedback that we're just like, or at least I sometimes have feedback where I feel that way, where I'm just like, I'm going to do whatever I want and, just kind of see where it goes. So I can definitely relate to that.
Well, and I think the same can be said for your work, Anna-Maie, in that I think a lot of your students do reflect some of your later work way more than some of your earlier stuff, which is very interesting in the way that it mirrors in terms of the colors and the textures and freedom of it. So that's kind of a cool dichotomy going on. Um, so a question I do want to throw out there is what difficulties do you find in translating a personal experience into the weaving and then sharing it with the world?
I mean, I think the whole like just being vulnerable thing is huge. Like I think that's just bigger than people. I think people take it for granted when they go to an exhibition or they go to a museum and they see artwork, like what that person had to do to put that out there. Yeah, and speaking from like a weaver's point of view, I feel like actually I think this is changing recently, but I feel like the visual art world doesn't necessarily like take weaving as seriously as it could be. I do see that shifting more and more, that weaving is becoming like a really substantial medium in the visual arts world. But I just think that's also a challenge as a fiber artist to, be like, I'm a fiber artist, and people are like, oh, okay,
Yeah, I mean, I think being vulnerable is difficult at times, because they're difficult things that you're talking about, and then some people may not have experienced what you've experienced, right? And so then you might have to like, I don't know if educate them is the right word, but you will have to talk to them about what those things mean and how they impact you. And I think that's sometimes difficult. But for me, I try not to think about it because I think if I do, it probably would prevent me from making the work that I'm making. Like I I've understood now that like I'm gonna have hard conversations about trauma. I'm gonna have harder conversations about grief and loss and what that looks like. And so yeah, I don't know. I think it just for me comes with the territory at this point.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of sort of what I've seen in your work, and I do a little bit in mine as well, is just like there's a lot of things that's unspoken about people's lives that we don't communicate to ourselves, our loved ones, and doing it through art isn't necessarily easier, but it's an outlet for it that's visible. Um, and it's also quote unquote permanent. Like it's something that's now hanging in my house. And so like I had a new friend come by the other day and comment on it. I was like, oh, I guess I need to tell them like what it's about. And so I'm talking about this very intimate part of my life that I wasn't necessarily ready to share, but it feels easier to share via a art piece that's hanging there in a very physical way. So I think there's a lot that's very powerful about that.
It's a good thing too, to force you to like, you know, share and like be open with people. I think that's quite pretty therapeutic too.
Yes.
Even if it's uncomfortable.
So along that train of thought, has sort of making this work impacted your sort of personal journey in some way? Like, has making these things sort of changed your life in certain ways?
I can answer that. I think for me, especially with the journal series weavings that are incorporating my grandparents' belongings, I'm kind of like obsessed now, and like family lineage, and like looking through photos, and I don't know, just kind of like tracking where everything is coming from. Like me and my mom were looking at photos the other day, and there was like this very loud, like neon pink and neon blue tracksuit that my mima had worn, and it's like in the closet. And then we came across a photo of her wearing it, and I was going to use it for one of the works, and I was like, oh, like, and so now I'm just kind of obsessed with I don't know, just, you know, looking into family stuff and seeing where everything comes from, and just kind of learning more. And yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. And I feel like I said before, sometimes like with a bad experience or like a negative thing that you're going through, it's really nice to make art, because then you still at the end of the day have something like positive that comes out of it. Yeah, so I just really enjoy that, and I love the process of making. So for me, it's always going to be a positive thing to make myself sit down and make the art, which is hard because a lot of the time I'm like, oh, I have laundry, I have dishes, it gets put on the back burner. But yeah, I just think that it's always gonna be positive, even if it's coming from a bad place initially.
I'm a newer artist, so I'm still like creating a body of work with which to express myself, I suppose. So I don't know that I have a reply to that question myself, but just the curiosity that I have, because we're talking about such vulnerable, you know, intimate things about ourselves. One thing I did want to talk about while we're here is both of you tend to use or often use plain weave. So I know that it can often be sort of misunderstood. So what do you think is misunderstood about it?
I feel like it's, from teaching a bunch of people over the years and a lot of beginners, it's seen and even like described as it can be described as a stepping stone. Like, here, let's master plain weave and then you can move on to other things. But I think it's more like the foundation that everything is built on. So like, you should really embrace plain weave and love plain weave as it's the foundation of weaving. So yeah, I think that it's often like, okay, plain weave next, what am I doing next? But I really like when people linger on plain weave.
Yeah, I can agree with that too. Yeah, I use plain weave in everything, just because it is, you know, it's simple, but then there are times where, you know, I'll be doing it, especially in the journal series, and I'll like skip over a few more threads. And I find that I do that because my mind is maybe elsewhere, or like I'm watching something or listening to something too intensely. And so I always just kind of leave whatever mistake in there and just keep going. Yeah.
Yeah. And your piece after with the paper, like, looks from afar looks so crazy and detailed and patterned, but is Plain weave.
It is. Yeah, it's just plain weave, that's all.
Yeah, I think there's so many ways you can go with plain weave. And I mean, is so impactful in both of your works. I mean, you saying you were doing the black forever and then did the smiley face, like that's hugely impactful and essentially just plain weave. And same for Bryana, you use so many alternative materials. And I think the plain weave brings that out. I liked you saying like being a weird kid grabbing things from the yard, but Anna-Maie actually just gifted me something called like a devil seed. And I was like, this is the best gift ever, these seeds from the ground, and I'm gonna weave with them. So there's so much that is highlighted when you do plain weave that I think people underestimate. Because complication is supposed to be more sophisticated, but sometimes simplicity is really is creates that more emotional depth, I suppose, in some way. So one more question I will ask is, how might you describe your current status as an artist, and where would you like to go from here?
I can go first. So I forget what year it was. I think it was 2017. I did a book club and we did the Artist Way, the whole like course. And one of the big takeaways that I had from that was just really going with your feeling and like whatever you want to do, like leaning into that creatively. So I feel like I'm kind of like that in my life. Like right now, the work that I'm doing at Intertwine Arts, I'm really, really enjoying and loving. So I'm like, I'm just gonna put all my like energy into that and like really lean into that. And sometimes I'm like really in the mood to collage. So I'll just do collaging for weeks and then back to weaving or whatever it is. But I try to like just let myself like lean into whatever I'm feeling and not try to, even though I am a weaver, like that's what I do and that's what I do for my job. Like I try not to like push myself to weave if I'm not feeling like weaving. Yeah, so that's kind of where I'm at right now. And I have really been enjoying sewing recently. Like I feel like that's something that I'm getting better at, even like the more I do it and the more I practice. So I've been sewing a lot more, and I would love to in the future experiment with like more soft sculpture and sewing like vessels and sculptures and things like that. So yeah, that's my answer.
Yeah, Anna-Maie, I can definitely relate to like not pushing yourself to weave, because there are moments where like I'm sometimes that way. I'm like, oh, I should weave today, but then it's like, nope, don't feel like it. I'm not gonna push myself to do it. But I think right now I want to create like more large pieces. That's where I'm kind of moving with my practice, and then continuing with journal series pieces. And then I also just started to experiment with printmaking. And so I've been doing that with some of my grandparents' clothes. Yeah, kind of what I've been trying out lately.
Oh, cool. Bryana, I just remembered I had a question for you about your journaling series. Do you do that every single day, like for the last, because at one point it was 2020 and then 2022. Like, did you do that for that whole time?
Yeah. Yeah, so I don't do them every day. Sometimes, I might skip a day. I might skip a week. In the beginning in 2020, I feel like I was doing them probably almost every day. Like sometimes I would probably do like 2 or 3 in a day, but now it's kind of lessened over the last few years. But I think in total, I probably have like 230 of them right now.
Wow.
Yeah.
Have you ever exhibited them all in one show?
No, that would be great. The only time I was able to exhibit a lot of them at once was actually earlier this year at the Chesterton Art Center in Indiana. We exhibited the first 79 of the series, so it was just all of 2020. And it was kind of wild to be back and see all of the works out of, you know, conservation boxes and just in a space again, because I could tell like that, you know, 2020 was wild for all of us. So I could definitely see that in the work.
As a huge body of work too. Intimidatingly,
Yeah.
but in a very cool way.
Thank you.
So I think I'm going to draw us to a close because it's about that time. But I want to thank both of you for being here, sharing yourself, sharing your work, and everybody who is attending. In gratitude for that, I am going to flash your contact info, which this is being recorded, so it will be up for a longer period of time for those who want to reach out to y'all. So we have Bryana and Anna-Mae's contact info, and of course, Intertwine Arts as well. Shameless plug, we do have another textile medley coming up on September 23rd with Jamie Boyle and Vandana Jain. This will also be sort of weaving focused, and it'll be a lot of talking about how text is transformed in weaving. So it'll be very cool. So make sure you register for that if you enjoyed this. And I also want to thank everybody for joining us today. If you enjoyed this, another shameless plug, please donate because it encourages these talks to continue. But everybody who is here, thank you for sharing your time, your energy. We have such lovely comments in the chat, so thank you for that. And I hope you all enjoy the rest of your evenings. Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.